5 days. That's all I had left before my $100,000 retirement bonus would be mine. 30 years in the same company, 30 years of opening the warehouse before sunrise, locking it after dark, training new hires, covering shifts when others called in sick, saving the company's neck more times than I could count. And then Richard Cole, the new CEO from New York. Sharp suit, sharper smile. The kind of man who shakes your hand while he's taking something from your pocket. That morning he called me into his glass-walled office. The rain was tapping the windows like it wanted in. On his desk, a single white envelope. "Leonard," he said, sliding it across the glass table like a poker chip. "Sign this severance. It's just business. Just business." To him, it was numbers. To me, it was 30 years. My late wife Linda's dreams. My daughter Sarah's future. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just looked at him and smiled, because I knew something he didn't. I'd helped write the employee handbook. I knew the clauses buried in those pages. Clauses that could turn that white envelope into a weapon. This wasn't the end of my career. It was the beginning of his downfall. And if you have ever seen someone try to take what you've earned, stay with me. You're about to see how the quiet fight becomes the loudest victory. And if justice is the kind of story you believe in, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss how this ends. My name is Leonard Harris. I'm 59 years old, and for the last 3 decades, I've called Midwest Steel Logistics my second home. When I first walked into that warehouse in Naperville, Illinois, I was a 29-year-old with more grit than experience. My late wife, Linda, was expecting our first child, and we needed stability. What I found was more than a paycheck, it was purpose. I started at the bottom, driving a forklift on the graveyard shift. The cold Midwest winters would seep through my gloves, but I never complained. I learned every aisle, every rack, every bolt and beam of that warehouse like it was the back of my own hand. Over the years, I trained new hires fresh out of high school, covered shifts, when storms kept others home and stayed late to fix problems that management didn't even know existed. Colleagues became family. Birthdays were celebrated in the break room. Losses were mourned together, and I took pride in it. Not the kind of pride that shouts, the quiet kind, the kind you feel when you know you've built something that matters. I'd seen the company survive recessions, warehouse fires, and leadership changes. Through it all, I stayed, because that's what you do when a place isn't just where you work, it's where you belong. I didn't know it yet, but everything I built here was about to be tested, and the fight for what was mine was only days away. Outside of work, my world was smaller, but just as important. I lived in a modest 2-story home on a quiet street in Naperville. Linda had picked it out 30 years ago because it had a maple tree in the front yard and enough space for a swing. She's been gone for 5 years now. Cancer doesn't care how many years you've planned together. Our daughter Sarah is 30 now. She teaches 2nd grade at the local elementary school. On weekends, she stops by with a box of donuts and that smile she got from her mother. I've never been the kind of man who chased titles or big houses. My reward was knowing the mortgage was paid, the lights stayed on, and my family had what they needed. Every extra hour I worked, every shift I covered, it was for them. And that's why the $100,000 retirement bonus mattered. Not for a new car or a fancy vacation, but for Sarah. It was going to be my way of helping her buy her first home, of giving her the security Linda and I had fought so hard for. I thought I had time. 5 days. That's all I had left before the bonus was mine. But time has a way of disappearing when someone decides they want what you've earned. And that someone was already in my office wearing a sharp suit and a sharper smile. His name was Richard Cole, 42 years old, fresh from New York with a resume full of turnarounds and cost-cutting successes. The first time I saw him, he was walking the warehouse floor in a tailored navy suit, looking like he'd taken a wrong turn on his way to Wall Street. He didn't shake hands. He scanned, like he was calculating what each of us was worth and how much he could save by making us disappear. Word spread fast the board had brought him in to modernize Midwest Steel Logistics. That meant new software, new procedures, and though they didn't say it out loud, new faces. In his first month, 3 department heads were replaced. By the second month, older supervisors were encouraged to take early retirement. The ones who didn't suddenly found themselves on performance improvement plans. I'd seen plenty of leadership changes in my 30 years, but this was different. Richard didn't ask questions to learn, he asked to find weaknesses. And every answer you gave felt like loading a bullet into his gun. I kept my head down, did my job, told myself I could ride this out. After all, I only had 5 days left. But in hindsight, I should have known men like Richard don't care about the calendar. They care about the bottom line. And I was about to become just another number in his cost-cutting plan. Richard didn't waste time. By the end of his 3rd month, the words restructuring plan were everywhere, posted on bulletin boards, whispered in break rooms, dropped casually in management emails. The first wave hit quietly. Older forklift operators, men who'd been here since before the first computer system, were suddenly reassigned to shifts nobody wanted. Then came the buyout offers early retirement packages with just enough cash to tempt you and just enough pressure to make you take them. When that didn't clear the field fast enough, the second wave rolled in performance reviews. Flawless records suddenly showed areas for improvement. Minor mistakes were blown up into formal write-ups, and the pattern was hard to miss. Most of the targets were over 50. I watched from my usual spot on the warehouse floor, clipboard in hand. I'd seen reorganizations before, but this felt different, colder, calculated, like someone was trimming fat from a budget spreadsheet, not making decisions about real people with mortgages and families. By the end of the month, 5 supervisors were gone, 3 managers replaced by people half their age, and every goodbye felt like another warning. Your turn is coming. I told myself I was safe. 30 years in, 5 days left until my bonus. I'd earned my place. But men like Richard, they don't see 30 years of loyalty. They see one line on a ledger, $100,000. They don't want to pay. And the storm he'd started was headed straight for me. 2 weeks before everything went down, I'd wrapped up the biggest project of my career. Richard had demanded a full overhaul of the warehouse layout, faster workflow, less wasted space, more efficiency. It was the kind of task that could bury a team for months. But I took it head on. Nights, weekends, 12-hour days. When it was done, the numbers spoke for themselves. Midwest Steel Logistics had just shaved nearly $200,000 a year in operating costs. Richard even stopped by my station that morning, smiled an expression that looked strange on him. "Nice work, Leonard," he said. "This is exactly the kind of thinking we need." I wanted to believe him. 30 years in, I'd earned more than a handshake. I'd earned my bonus, my send-off, maybe even a little respect. But then I noticed something. The praise was just words. No follow-up. No talk of my future. And when I passed by the HR office later that day, the door was shut. Inside, Richard was talking to Felicia Tran, our HR director. They stopped when they saw me. I brushed it off. Told myself it was nothing. After all, I had 5 days left. 5 quiet days until I walked out with my $100,000 bonus. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The air felt heavier. Conversation stopped when I entered the room. And for the first time in decades, I felt like a guest in my own warehouse. It was the kind of warning you don't forget. I was in the break room pouring myself a cup of burnt coffee from the old machine we'd had since '98 when Tommy Rodriguez walked in. Tommy's been running forklifts here for 20 years. Tough guy. Doesn't spook easy. He waited until the room was empty before speaking. Lenny said, keeping his voice low, "They're clearing out people close to retirement. George from quality control gone. 2 weeks before his pension bonus. Patricia in accounting. Same thing. And I heard your name." I stared at him, mug in hand. "You sure about this?" He nodded. Richard's been in HR a lot lately. Files open on the desk. Looks like he's hunting. I wanted to dismiss it, to tell myself Tommy was just repeating rumors, but the look in his eyes, it wasn't gossip, it was fear. I finished my coffee, though it tasted like metal now, and thanked him. "I've got 5 days," I said. "I can make it." But Tommy just shook his head. 5 days is a long time when someone wants you gone. The rest of that shift, I couldn't shake his words. Every creak of the warehouse felt louder. Every closed-door meeting felt like it had my name on the agenda. Something was coming, and thanks to Tommy, I knew it was coming for me. 5 days left. That morning, the sky over Naperville was the color of wet concrete. I pulled into the parking lot, the same spot I'd parked in for 30 years, and something felt off. Felicia Tran from HR was waiting by the front door. She didn't meet my eyes as she held it open. "Richard wants to see you," she said. No smile, no small talk, just those 6 words. I followed her down the hallway. The click of her heels echoed off the glass walls. Richard's office was all chrome and shine, like a showroom no one actually lived in. He didn't stand when I walked in, just slid a white envelope across the desk the same way a dealer pushes a losing hand in poker. "Leonard," he said, voice flat, "sign this severance agreement. It's effective immediately. You'll get 12 weeks pay and continued health coverage for 3 months, but you need to sign today." I looked at the envelope, my name typed neatly on the front. Inside, I already knew was the paperwork that would erase 30 years in under 3 minutes. "It's just business," Richard added, leaning back in his chair. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I'd heard those words before, and this time I knew exactly what to do with them. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice, didn't even ask why. I just picked up the envelope, glanced at it like it was a grocery list, and slid it into my jacket pocket. Richard's smirk widened, mistaking silence for surrender. "Good," he said. "Felicia will process your paperwork by the end of the day." I stood, shook his hand, and walked out. But in my head, I wasn't walking away. I was loading the first round. 30 years teaches you things like where the company hides its skeletons. And I wasn't just another name on his cost-saving spreadsheet. I'd helped write the 2009 Employee Handbook. I knew about Clause 4.7b, the Retirement Benefit Protection Clause, a little line of legal armor that said any employee within 30 days of retirement eligibility couldn't be terminated without cause. And restructuring didn't count. Richard probably didn't know it existed, or maybe he thought I didn't. That was his mistake. I went back to my station on the warehouse floor, packed my personal things, slowly giving myself time to think, time to plan. This wasn't going to be a scene in HR with raised voices and security escorts. No, I wanted this done right. By the book. Because nothing would be sweeter than beating Richard Cole with the very rules he thought he controlled. That night I sat at my kitchen table, same spot where Linda and I used to plan our future. The envelope lay in front of me, unopened. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name Mark Benson, my nephew, 35 years old, labor attorney in Milwaukee, sharp as a tack with just enough stubbornness to make him dangerous in a courtroom. When he picked up, I skipped the small talk. "Mark, I think my company just broke its own rules." I told him everything. Richard's arrival, the wave of firings, the white envelope, and most importantly, Clause 4.7b. There was a pause on the line. Then Mark said, "Uncle Len, don't sign anything. Send me copies of your contract, the handbook, and any emails you've got from management about restructuring, tonight." I fax scanned and emailed until midnight. Mark called back 20 minutes later. "You're right, if they terminate you without cause this close to your bonus, it's breach of contract. And if they've done this to others," he let the sentence hang, "we could be looking at a federal case." For the first time that day, my chest felt lighter. I wasn't alone anymore. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering every shred of evidence, because Richard Cole had just made himself the defendant in a battle he never saw coming. The next morning, I drove up to Milwaukee. Mark's office sat in a brick building downtown, just a few blocks from the courthouse. His desk was already covered in my paperwork when I walked in. He didn't waste time. "Uncle Len," he said, tapping the handbook, "Clause 4.7b is your golden ticket. But this is bigger than just you. If Richard has been firing other employees before their bonuses or pensions kick in, that's age discrimination. Federal law. We're talking serious penalties." I leaned forward. "You think he's done this before?" Mark nodded. "I'd bet on it. Guys like him don't risk a lawsuit for one payout. They run the same play over and over. We just need proof." He'd laid out the plan. First, gather every email memo and meeting note with Richard's name on it. Second, find other employees who'd been terminated close to their benefit dates. Third, see if any of them had documentation or, better yet, recordings. If we can show a pattern, Mark said, we can turn this into a class action lawsuit. That means damages for everyone involved. And Richard, he's done. I felt something I hadn't in days momentum. This wasn't just about getting my bonus back anymore. This was about making sure Richard Cole never pulled this stunt on anyone else. The next morning, I was back in Naperville before sunrise. Officially, I was packing up my personal items. Unofficially, I was about to turn the company's own files into Richard's worst nightmare. I still had access to my work email until Friday. That gave me 2 days. I slipped into my office, closed the door, and started printing every email with the words restructuring severance or retirement in it. One memo caught my eye, a spreadsheet marked cost reduction Q4. Next to each name was a dollar amount. My name had $100 000 in bold red. And there were others: George from Quality Control, Patricia and Accounting, all with numbers beside their names. I printed it, slid it into my folder. Heart pounding, I kept going. Meeting notes, policy drafts, even a few instant message logs between Richard and Felicia. By 3 p.m., I had 47 pages. I stashed them in a plain cardboard box under my desk. Anyone walking by would just think I was clearing out my things. Before leaving, I made one last stop down to the shipping department where the old copier had a USB port. I scanned everything to a thumb drive. Insurance in case the papers went missing. When I walked out that evening, box in hand, I wasn't just carrying memories of 30 years. I was carrying the rope Richard Cole had handed me, one email at a time. I thought I had enough. 47 pages of proof felt like a mountain, but the real weapon came from someone I didn't expect. That night, my phone buzzed. It was George Murphy, Quality Control, 32 years with a company, fired just 3 weeks before his pension bonus. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "Len, I heard what happened. You might want to come by my place." I drove over. George lived in a small ranch house just outside Aurora. He met me at the door with a grim smile and led me to his kitchen. I recorded him, George said, pulling out his phone. He scrolled, tapped, and Richard's voice filled the room. "Honestly, George, we need fewer gray heads and more fresh thinking. And we can't afford to keep people past their benefit dates. It's just bad business." Hearing it out loud hit harder than I expected. This wasn't just corporate cruelty. It was intentional, targeted, and illegal. George had kept the recording just in case. He handed me a copy on a flash drive. "Do what you need to do, Len. Make him pay." I left his house gripping that flash drive like it was solid gold. Because in a way, it was. This wasn't just paperwork anymore. This was the smoking gun. The next morning, I drove straight to Milwaukee and dropped the flash drive on Mark's desk. He plugged it in, listened to Richard's voice, and let out a slow whistle. "This is it, Uncle Len. But it gets better." He slid a notepad toward me. On it, he'd written 8 names. All former employees. All terminated within 60 days of a major retirement benefit. "I called them last night," Mark said. 5 picked up, 3 have paperwork, 2 have emails just like yours. And 1, Patricia Walsh, has a calendar invite from Richard labeled Final Review, scheduled exactly 2 weeks before her early retirement date. I stared at the list. These weren't just co-workers. They were friends. People I'd worked beside through snowstorms, night shifts, and endless safety drills. "This isn't a single case anymore," Mark continued. "It's a pattern. And with George's recording, we have intent. We filed this as a class action suit with the EEOC, and Richard Cole's career is over." For the first time, I realized the scale of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about my $100 000 bonus. It was about every name on that list. I nodded. "Then let's make sure he remembers every single one of them." Mark smiled. "Oh, he will." 3 months later, I walked back into Midwest Steel Logistics, this time through the front doors, not the side entrance with a cardboard box. Felicia met me in the lobby, a stack of documents in her hands. "It's official," she said, smiling for the first time in months. "Full settlement. You get your $100 000 bonus plus interest. And the board has approved compensation for every employee in the class action suit." The numbers were staggering, over $1.2 million, spread across 8 people. George, Patricia, and the others would finally get what was stolen from them. As for Richard Cole, he was gone. No quiet resignation, no graceful exit. The settlement made it clear terminated for cause. His name now a cautionary tale in every HR seminar from here to New York. When I signed my paperwork, I didn't feel smug. I felt steady, solid, like the warehouse floor I'd walked for 30 years was finally level again. Mark clapped me on the shoulder. "Uncle Len, you didn't just win your case. You made sure no one else will have to fight this fight." I looked around the lobby at the people coming and going and thought about the policy changes the board had promised protections with my name on them. Sometimes revenge is about payback, but sometimes it's about making sure the wrong never happens again. 2 weeks after the settlement, I finally did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I slept in on a Monday. No alarm clock, no warehouse calls, just the sound of wind moving through the maple tree Linda planted out front. Sarah came by that afternoon with a box of donuts and her 2 kids. They ran circles in the yard while she poured us coffee. "You did it, Dad," she said. "Mom would have been proud." I thought about Linda, about all the nights we sat at that kitchen table making plans. She'd wanted to travel to see the Grand Canyon Yellowstone and every little roadside diner in between. So that's what I'm going to do. Last week I bought an RV. Not brand new, but solid. Big enough for me, Sarah, when she wants to join, and the grandkids if they can talk their mom into it. This fight took a lot out of me, but it also gave me something back proof that standing your ground still matters, even when the odds say otherwise. And if you're watching this, maybe you've been in your own fight. Maybe you're in it right now. Don't let them take what's yours without a battle. I've got more stories like this, stories where justice doesn't just happen, it's made. So hit that subscribe button, stick around, and maybe next time it'll be your story we tell.